Hey, what's up, guys? My name's Will Polliard, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through step by step how I initially qualify leads as a B2B salesperson selling SaaS and high ticket services. Even if you know nothing and haven't even started your first day as an account executive, or if you're already on the job and just don't feel like you have a systematic way to qualify your leads, by the end of this video, you'll be equipped with a simple, easy to follow process for qualifying your sales leads before they even enter your pipeline. In this video, we're going to cover why I believe qualifying leads is important, what I keep in mind when qualifying my own leads. We're also going to talk about the two most important factors that drive my qualifying criteria, and we're going to discuss 4 secondary aspects that I evaluate too while I'm qualifying my leads. So with that said, let's jump right into it. First off, let's talk about why I believe qualifying leads is important in the first place. Number one, and my most important thing that I like to keep top of mind is time is our most precious asset. Time really is money for salespeople, and we don't want to spend our time on people who are unqualified or tire kickers. Instead, as a salesperson, I want to invest my time to sell to the right fit people that I can help and that I should help. Secondary to that, I'm also keeping in mind by correctly qualifying my leads, I'm actually able to accurately forecast my sales for myself, for my manager, and for my team. And when we do a poor job of qualifying our leads, we can oftentimes get our own hopes up and be freaking out at the end of the month or end of the quarter. And we also get our team's hopes up with missed commits that lead to missed sales goals. And I never want to let my team down. So by qualifying my leads accurately, I'm able to have more integrity in my actual sales forecast. Now, third reason I believe qualifying leads is important is when we correctly qualify or disqualify our leads into our pipeline, it actually ensures that we can devote the right level of attention to the good fit future clients, which allows us to deliver a more exceptional level of customer service, offer a better customer experience, and that leads to higher win rates. And then it frees up our time so we can go reach out to more good fit clients or follow up with our existing clients to generate new business and referrals. And the fourth and last reason that I want to talk about today about why I believe qualifying our leads is important is honestly pretty self-serving, but by qualifying our leads, we can actually save ourselves a ton of frustration from conversations that aren't going anywhere and really just end up in wasted time and tons of headaches. Now, when I'm conducting my initial qualification and determining if the person I'm talking to is a lead to work and add to my pipeline, here are a few things that I like to keep in mind. So first and foremost, I want to be very transparent. I'm always looking for every reason to do a deal. I look at it as, more deals equals more revenue, equals more commission, equals more folks that I can help, equals more referrals, equals more word of mouth. It's just better for everybody. But also in that same vein, I'm not delusional. I do treat everyone like they can buy, should buy, and will buy. But like we talked about before, I also know that my time is my number one asset. So I'm not afraid to say no if the lead's not a good fit. Now, switching gears over to what I specifically look for when I'm qualifying my prospects. There's going to be 2 main criteria here. And number one, and the most important thing in my opinion, is I need to identify a problem that needs to be solved. Regardless of the industry we're in, we really need something to latch onto that's going to have a positive impact on the business. This could be anything, any sort of problem that's creating friction within the organization, holding the company back from their strategy and goals, costing them money, keeping them from making more money, creating misalignment between departments, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. But at the end of the day, people buy stuff to solve problems. So one of the first things that I would recommend for you to more accurately qualify your leads is first identify what problems does our organization solve, and then ask the right questions to surface these problems. A great book recommendation for you guys, if that's something you're interested in or need some guidance on, is a book called Gap Selling by by James Keenan. This is really where, once I read that book, this really took a foothold in my sales process, and it has been a game changer. So I highly recommend go on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, pick that up if this is something that you need and you're interested in. Now, in addition to the problem, the second primary qualifying criteria I'm looking for when I'm qualifying my leads is mutual agreement on next steps. So first off, it needs to make sense to me to continue the conversation. There needs to be a problem that we could solve here. Hey, everything's lining up. Sweet. I want to get this person rolling into a discovery call. The second aspect of that is like, I also need my prospect that once I recommend those next steps to them, I need them to commit those to take those steps with me and go on this journey with me together. And if I can get those two things, a problem and mutual agreement on next steps, those are my primary qualifying criteria that I'm looking for at this point in the sales process. Now, while identifying a key problem to solve and getting agreement on next steps are my two primary criteria when I'm qualifying my sales leads, there are a few other things that I consider and I think that we should talk about here. So number one is budget. This is probably at the top of everybody's mind. We're typically taught, hey, you got to qualify on budget. Like, we don't want to work with people who don't have budget. In my experience and the way that I like to run my sales process, usually up front, I'm not overly concerned with budget. The reason is when I first meet with someone, I haven't gone through a full discovery process. I haven't really identified clearly, the best and most extensive way that I can help. And I really just haven't built up a ton of value and or trust really at this point. Now, if there are major red flags about their ideal customer profile, maybe they're on the low end or even outside of the low end of the typical annual revenue of a company that we work with, this is definitely going to be something that I lean into. But keep in mind, they could be in the middle of raising a new round of funding, which is kind of prompting these conversations. They might be in the middle of a merger or an acquisition. There could be any number of events. The data that we get from LinkedIn or one of these other platforms could be incorrect. So there are so many different variables at play where I'm not overly disqualifying folks based on some of this information. Now, I may also, in this initial conversation, based on the way a prospect talks to me, maybe they seem super price sensitive, or it really seems like they're talking on a much smaller scale than what I typically offer. This will be a red flag as well. Either way, like, these are questions that we want to dig into. You can, approach some of these sort of things by asking them how long they've been looking for a solution like yours. Have they invested in anything like this before? Are they actively talking to, alternative partners or providers? And then asking them if they've received any other proposals and actually like what the investment levels are in those specific proposals. There's a ton of questions that we can ask here. And the idea is we can get a better understanding into what they're doing today and really use their past experiences to help give us a better understanding of how they're going to make future decisions. But really, point I want to get across here is at this point in the sales process, I'm really focused on learning more, discussing or discovering how we can help. I want to build trust. I want to create value. I want to do all of this before I really convolute the conversation around money. Trust me, we don't want to be afraid of around talking about money. I love talking about money. We got to ask for the money to get the close, but that'll come later in the sale for sure. So I don't get too hung up on budget at this stage in the process. Second thing I want to talk about with you guys is decision makers. So, I love talking to decision makers, and just like everybody, every other salesperson, 10 out of 10 times, I'm going to prefer to talk directly with the decision maker from the beginning of the sales process. But a lot of times what happens if I'm talking to someone who maybe reports directly to the decision maker or is a key champion in the decision-making committee, or is doing research on behalf of some of those other folks, I'm perfectly fine with talking to those folks, in this initial call and still moving the opportunity into the pipeline. Now, one thing I want to make clear is I do need commitment from the point of contact, whoever it is that I'm talking to, who may not be the ultimate decision maker, to bring the right people into the conversation in subsequent calls. But it's not a deal breaker for me on the first call. However, definitely a red flag if these folks don't get involved in those subsequent conversations. I think handling that is a discussion for a separate video, but definitely something where if I can't get commitment and actually get those folks on a call with me, sales process may, we may alter our sales process here, and definitely a big red flag that needs to be addressed. Now, third thing I want to talk about is timeline. So, a lot of times we're taught to qualify on timeline. I will say from my experience, the way that I approach this is usually in a, B2B sale for some sort of high ticket service or a substantial SaaS product like a CRM platform. Usually these timelines are squishy in the beginning anyway. A lot of times what I see happen is, when asked about timeline, a new prospect may say something vague and ultimately untrue, where they're, or maybe not untrue, but maybe a little exaggerated on the validity of the response. But they may say something like, I needed this yesterday, or, I need this ASAP. And what happens is we get tempted as sales reps to actually skip steps in the sales process, which I want to make sure, you all know my recommendation here. We never want to skip steps in the sales process. But ultimately, these types of prospects who give us these kind of vague, generic answers, a lot of times what happens is we get tempted, and we may accelerate the sales process. And ultimately, a lot of times what happens is we end up, waiting much longer than anticipated on the back end of the sale for the client to sign. And so this isn't always the case, but it's definitely something I've seen quite a bit. And so my key principle here that I want to make clear is, while I do want to know some sort of timeline on the initial conversation, and definitely the more defined and the more logic behind that timeline can definitely help drive urgency in the sale and the whole sales process. A lot of times this isn't going to be set in stone on the first call, and that's okay. Just remember, regardless of what they say, don't get tempted to skip steps in your process. Make sure you run a thorough sales process. I highly encourage you to be expedient and run a sales process as quickly as possible. I think it's a key differentiator for a lot of B2B organizations, but don't skip steps. And then last but not least, I did want to bring up ideal customer profile, or the fit of a company's firmographics, like industry, revenue, business model, etc. So I didn't really talk about this, but I do want you guys to know I am absolutely, this is like table stakes here. I'm absolutely considering this as I qualify a lead, but I'm typically researching this information prior to the initial conversation, using their website, using LinkedIn, using any third-party tool that I have. My CRM usually gives me a lot of this information that I need. And I'm using any red flags that I uncover in that pre-call research process as talking points in the initial conversation to lean into to help me better assess and qualify this lead. Now, I will say for me, I'm willing to accept leads more on the fringe of our ideal customer profile if the fit, the use case or that problem that we talked about is a slam dunk fit and they agree to next steps. Again, those are my two primary qualifying criteria for a reason. If I've got a great problem we can solve that's a slam dunk fit and I get agreement on next steps, I'm typically moving forward with the opportunity. And my reasoning here is, if it's a great use case, let's do it. For all I know, this could help me identify a new market for our organization to target. And really, last thing I want to do is be too restrictive with my pipeline, just because something like industry or headcount or revenue, may say, hey, it's not a good fit, but everything else lines up perfectly. Like I said, there could be so many different factors going on behind the scenes, or just incorrect data where I never want to look for reasons to disqualify someone. I want to make sure I'm adding more people to my pipeline, But if you're in a hyper specific audience or service, maybe a very specific industry, obviously I recommend use common sense here. This is going to be, this stuff might be a little more restrictive for you. But if you're like me and work at a company that serves clients across many different industries, I say lead with use case. Again, my mindset is I'm always looking for reasons to do a deal. I'm not trying to talk myself out of doing any particular deals. So guys, there you have it. That's how I qualify my leads during my initial intro call in B2B sales. I hope this information gave you something valuable that you can walk away with and incorporate into your own sales process to start hitting bigger numbers and helping more people in a better way. Let me know what questions you have down in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.